and that the was about handcuffs, choking, putting on dog collars.
Do you get those at Petco?
Shannon Sharpe says he's temporarily stepping away from ESPN in the wake of a $50 million lawsuit accusing him of A woman filed suit against Sharpe on Sunday, accusing him of her.
It started as a murmur, just a flicker in the wind, like dry leaves rustling before a coming storm. Shannon Sharpe, the Hall of Fame icon turned media titan, was no stranger to making noise. His commanding presence and no-holds-barred takes had made him a staple in every living room. But this time, the spotlight wasn't on his game breakdowns or his unforgettable interviews. No, this was different. This was darker. The attention he was getting now wasn't from sports fans. It was from the entire world watching a scandal unfold in real time. A scandal so massive, so volatile, it threatened to wipe out everything he had.
Alrighty, y'all. So the Shannon Sharpe ESPN, does he still keep his job conversation is beginning to, I was going to say beginning to happen, but it's been happening, but I think now it's beginning to get louder because of different things that Attorney Busby has released, including the audios. So right now the conversation is, why is Shannon Sharpe still able to be
built over decades? The man who had stood tall, unshakable, untouchable, was now smack in the eye of a storm that just might consume him. And if the whispers are true, Shannon Sharpe isn't just trying to clear his name, he's trying to disappear. Speculation spiraled when whispers started to spread that Shannon Sharpe had withdrawn huge amounts of cash from his accounts, allegedly emptying out his entire financial portfolio in a single, calculated move. The specifics were unclear, but sources close to the situation claimed these massive withdrawals seemed like the kind of financial maneuver someone makes when they're preparing to vanish. The rumors only deepened with talk of private jets, untraceable, destinations, and, even more mysteriously, the total silence on his social media. For a man who built his brand on being in the spotlight, the sudden absence felt like the calm before a storm. Fans and critics alike started asking, where is Shannon Sharpe, and why does it feel like he's about to disappear? But then came the whispers of the past, the ones that resurfaced and started to haunt him. We're talking about a temporary restraining order filed in 2010 by a woman he was involved with who accused him of sexual assault. Though the order was dismissed, the timing of these resurfacing stories was just too coincidental, and as the fire of accusations grew, so did the pile of shocking allegations. What started as verbal threats evolved into controlling behavior, culminating in a $50 million lawsuit filed by an anonymous woman, Jane Doe. Her claims depicted a disturbing pattern of manipulation and emotional abuse. Despite Sharpe's legal team quickly dismissing the lawsuit as nothing but a money grab, the public wasn't so easily swayed. Then came the audio, an uncomfortably chilling clip, purportedly of Sharpe's voice threatening, "If you say that word one more time, I'm going to choke the life out of you." In the court of public opinion, audio evidence is a game changer. It's raw, it's immediate, and once it's out there, it's impossible to forget. On Easter Sunday, the lawsuit hit Nevada State Court, and the fallout, instant. Social media exploded with hashtags trending for days. Memes, outrage, and amateur sleuths ran wild, dissecting every second of that audio, trying to decode what it truly meant for Sharpe's character. Some die-hard fans clung to his defense, arguing that his larger-than-life persona made it hard to believe he could be capable of such actions. But others, they pointed to the mounting accusations as proof that the man they once looked up to might not be the hero they thought he was. As the chaos unfolded, Shannon Sharpe's silence began to speak volumes. Much like the Deshaun Watson cases, where over 20 plaintiffs made claims but no one really knew the identities of the accusers, the situation with Sharpe seemed to be different. Here, Sharpe knew exactly who was behind the allegations, and it became clear from the statement issued by his lawyer, Lanny Davis, that efforts had been made to resolve the matter privately before the lawsuit took shape. But that audio, it was just one part of the entire picture. Behind closed doors, Sharpe's accusers were stepping into the spotlight, each ready to share their own stories. Jane Doe wasn't alone. McKillie Bundy Evans, a former girlfriend, had reappeared with accusations of her own, claiming years of mistreatment, threats, and emotional abuse. She painted a picture of a man who started their relationship with charm but quickly turned into someone deeply controlling. Evans claimed Sharpe was so determined to protect his image, he would go to any extreme to maintain the public's perception. But then there were the others, unnamed women, former colleagues, even whispers from his time at FS1, all pointing to a troubling pattern of behavior. If the stories were true, they would shake Sharpe's carefully constructed world to its core, and that's when we learned about the lawsuit against him. This wasn't just any lawsuit, these were serious allegations: assault and battery, intentional, infliction of emotional distress. The nature of these claims gave them far more weight than something trivial, like a slip-and-fall case or even a minor car accident. The legal team representing Jane Doe wasted no time turning up the heat. Tony Busby, a high-profile attorney known for taking on big names, led the charge. His strategy was clear: make the public care, make them listen, and make Sharpe feel the pressure. Releasing the audio was just the first shot fired. Rumors spread about more evidence: text messages, photographs, even video clips that could further tear apart Sharpe's well-crafted public image. While Sharpe's team scrambled to dismiss the claims as exaggerated or taken out of context, the damage had already been done. The narrative was slipping out of his hands, and that might have been the hardest blow of all. His lawyer publicly stated that the refusal to settle showed it wasn't just about money. No, this was bigger. This was a full-blown shake-up. As the legal battles grew more intense, the public scrutiny grew with it. Every move Sharpe made, or didn't make, was scrutinized in real time. His decision to step away from his ESPN duties was met with mixed feelings. Some saw it as a smart move, a way to focus on clearing his name, while others interpreted it as an admission of guilt, a sign the pressure was getting to him. Then came the rumors of his escape. Whispers of private jets, secret offshore accounts, and an undisclosed island destination started swirling, adding a layer of mystery and intrigue around the man who once was an open book. Was Sharpe really planning to disappear? Or was this just another twist in the already complicated saga? No one knew for sure, but the possibility alone kept the story alive. Tony Busby said, "This is key evidence in our case against Mr. Sharpe, so it will not be coming out. He will not be leaking this, and basically it's going to come out during the trial, right? If there is a trial, if there's a trial, it will come out." To me, it sounds like Tony Busby is dangling this piece of evidence over Shannon Sharpe's head, offering a choice. We can settle this, or we can take it to trial, and then the video will be released for everyone to see. The industry itself was watching closely. Shannon Sharpe wasn't just a sports analyst, he was a brand, a powerhouse, a cultural icon. His sudden departure from ESPN left a hole no one seemed ready to fill. Names were floated as possible replacements, but none of them had the same weight or charisma that Sharpe brought to the table. Behind closed doors, executives were scrambling, trying to distance themselves from the scandal while also realizing they might have just lost one of their biggest stars. The stakes weren't just high for Sharpe, but for everyone connected to him. Reputations were on the line, and the ripple effects could reach far beyond the sports world. So, you guys remember that video Shannon Sharpe said was going to be released? Yeah, well, it did, and no one was prepared for what it showed. But amidst all the noise, speculation, and outrage, one question remained. What was Shannon Sharpe really hiding? The rumors of his escape, the mounting allegations, the audio clips, the lawsuits. They were all part of a puzzle that no one had fully put together. But there was one thing everyone could agree on. This wasn't just a man trying to save his career. This was a man fighting to save himself. And as the layers of this story continued to peel away, it became clear this wasn't a story about a single lawsuit or one audio clip. This was about a deep-rooted history of unresolved incidents, allegations, and whispers that had been kept in the shadows. Shannon Sharpe didn't just have a skeleton or two in his closet. No, he had an entire graveyard. And as shocking as that was, what was even more shocking was how this was all handled. The cracks in Sharpe's polished public image didn't just start with Jane Doe or McKinley Bundy Evans. No, they had been, showing long before this entire mess came to light. Take 1995, for example. A then rising star, Sharpe, found himself caught up in a physical altercation that ended up on the wrong side of the law. The details were fuzzy, as they tend to be when public figures are involved, but what stood out was that both Sharpe and the woman involved were charged. The charges were dismissed as a misunderstanding, a typical he said, she said case, and the world moved on. But what if that wasn't just a one-off? What if that was the beginning of a much deeper, much darker pattern? The public didn't know, or maybe didn't care to notice, but this misunderstanding wasn't just about an argument. According to reports buried in local police logs, the confrontation started inside Sharpe's home and escalated to the point where furniture was thrown. Voices were raised and the neighbors called authorities. Witnesses claimed they could hear the shouting all the way from the street. When the police arrived, both Sharpe and the woman had visible signs of a physical altercation. Official charges were eventually dropped, but the evidence was there, buried beneath the surface. Labeled as simple battery, there was nothing simple about the scene described in those early reports. Yet, in a move that would become all too familiar in Shannon Sharpe's life, the matter was quietly swept under the rug before it could pick up any media traction. The fact that he refused to look at the evidence gives off the impression that he's trying to maintain plausible deniability. Maybe the evidence should be released, just so he can't continue denying his actions. I mean, if I were in his shoes, I would definitely want to know what the evidence shows to protect my innocence. Then came the 2004 incident, which mirrored the one nearly a decade earlier. This time, it involved another woman, another explosive situation, and another police report that, much like before, would vanish into the fog of private settlements and public amnesia. What's particularly striking about this case is how it was framed in the media at the time. Sharpe's legal team worked overtime to paint their client as a victim of exaggerated claims and media sensationalism. But court records tell a different story. The woman involved alleged that Sharpe physically removed her from his home in a way that left her shaken and humiliated. The charges were later downgraded during mediation, and once again, the public was left with more questions than answers. Why were these incidents always being swept under the rug? And how many more cases were there that never even made it to a courtroom? Perhaps the most disturbing part is the allegations that never made the headlines. Multiple former colleagues and acquaintances have since alluded to Sharpe's history of temperamental outbursts and domineering behavior. Yet these whispers were often dismissed as nothing more than gossip or jealousy. One former production assistant who worked with him during his early broadcasting days described a workplace environment where Sharpe's temper was an open secret. Everyone knew to avoid him when he was in one of his moods, the assistant allegedly said years later. It wasn't just yelling. It was intimidation. You felt like you couldn't say no to him. While no formal complaints surfaced from that time, the consistent stories cast a long shadow over Sharpe's past, raising unsettling questions about how long this behavior had been tolerated and why. Fast forward to 2004, another woman, another incident, and surprise, surprise, another charge. This time, it was for allegedly removing a woman from his home in a way that was anything but gentle. And once again, the case was quietly settled and brushed aside like an inconvenient headline. They called it mediation. A private resolution? No. Trial? No public spectacle. Just another story fading into the background as Sharpe's star continued to rise. But the whispers didn't stop. They never do. For every public incident, there were rumors of others. Rumors that didn't make it into police reports but continued to circulate in locker rooms, production studios, and private conversations. Instantly, people expect things to happen, like it's some kind of immediate fix. But it doesn't work like that. The righteous people over on Reddit are already dissecting and digging into every detail. And then there was the infamous restraining order filed back in 2010. That was a bombshell at the time, a rare crack in the armor of one of sports media's most charismatic figures. The allegations were shocking, detailed, and impossible to ignore, at least for a moment. But just as quickly as the story broke, it vanished. The order was dropped, and Sharpe returned to the spotlight as if nothing had happened. For years, it seemed like the world had forgotten, but Michaela Bundy Evans hadn't. She lived with the aftermath, the threats, and the emotional scars. And now, all these years later, she's back demanding to be heard. What's even more unsettling is the consistency of these stories. Different women, different circumstances, but always the same thread: control, dominance, and the unshakable sense that Sharpe believed himself untouchable. It wasn't just about the accusations themselves, it was about how they were handled. Time and time again, it seemed money and influence were used to make problems disappear. Settlements, private mediations, and non-disclosure agreements became his tools of choice, creating a barrier between Sharpe and any real accountability. And why not? When you're at the top of your game, when millions of fans hang on your every word and networks are willing to overlook almost anything for the ratings, why wouldn't you believe you could get away with it? According to reports, that video won't be released. Attorney Tony Busby made it clear they have no intention of releasing it, emphasizing that it's a strong part of their case and will remain sealed until trial. Now, that's interesting, considering Shannon Sharpe had repeatedly said he believed the video would come out. But there's been a shift. As the past resurfaced to haunt him, Sharpe's once rock-solid defense strategy began to show its cracks. His legal team, known for their aggressive tactics and media savvy, found themselves scrambling to control a story that was simply too big, too messy, and too public to manage. Every new revelation, every resurfaced allegation, every leaked audio clip only added fuel to the fire that was growing out of control. And as more women began sharing their stories, the narrative shifted. This wasn't just about Shannon Sharpe anymore. This was about power, privilege, and the systems that allowed men like him to operate without consequence for years, even decades. The victims' stories, once dismissed as baseless or exaggerated, now carried a weight that couldn't be ignored. Michaela Bundy Evans spoke of years of manipulation and fear of a man who believed he could silence her with threats and intimidation. Jane Doe described a relationship that started with charm and promises but quickly turned into something far darker. Then there were the others, women who had worked with Sharpe, crossed paths with him, or simply found themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. Their accounts varied, but there was one unmistakable common thread: a man who used his charisma and status as both a weapon and a shield. But it wasn't just the legal battles playing out in courtrooms. They were unfolding in the court of public opinion, where every new accusation, every leaked message, and every carefully crafted statement from Sharpe's team was dissected in real time. Social media became a battleground, with fans, critics, and armchair detectives weighing in on every twist and turn. While some remained loyal to Sharpe, convinced of his innocence or unwilling to let go of their idol, others began to see the cracks in the facade. The Shannon Sharpe they thought they knew was starting to look like a carefully constructed illusion, one that was quickly unraveling. Once again, I've never seen anyone handle a situation worse than Shannon and his team. From the very beginning, they mishandled everything. The entire approach was wrong. Perhaps the most damning evidence of all were the leaked text messages. They were explicit, shocking, and impossible to spin. They showed a side of Sharpe that few had ever seen before, this side that was controlling, demeaning, and utterly at odds with the charismatic persona he projected on screen. And while his legal team insisted that the messages were taken out of context, that they were part of a consensual dynamic, the damage was already done. Because in the court of public opinion, perception is everything. And right now, the perception was that Shannon Sharpe had something to hide. As the scandal unfolded, the stakes only grew higher. This wasn't just about lawsuits or lost endorsements anymore. This was about a legacy, a career built on hard work, talent, and sheer force, of personality, now at risk of being overshadowed by allegations that refused to go away. While Sharpe's defenders pointed to his years of success, his philanthropy, and his undeniable contributions to the sports world, his critics asked a far more uncomfortable question. At what cost? How many stories had been silenced? How many lives had been affected? All to protect a man who seemed to believe he was untouchable. But the story doesn't end here. It can't. Because for every revelation, there are 10 more questions waiting to be answered. How deep does this go? How many more voices are waiting to be heard? And perhaps most importantly, what happens next? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and stay tuned. This story is far from over. See you in the next one.